whatever happens here. So Jennifer DeYoung, I'm currently the M365 project director, and have been at Enterprise Information Services for a few years now. Wanted to tell you just a little bit about how I came to know anything about this topic, my journey here. I've been in state government for almost 28 years now, and I started out in the field as a case manager, then became a trainer for a bit, and then spent 10 years as a policy analyst, 11 years as a policy analyst with Department of Human Services, Aging and People with Disabilities program. And I flew by the seat of my pants, honestly. That was just a learned role, but little did I know I was managing change for all of those years. I never used those words to describe it, but as you can imagine, in any sort of, large state program, you have a policy change, there's implications to that you have to consider. There's forms, there's systems, there's people. So had really kind of gotten my chops through all of that. And then towards the end of my policy analyst role, I started to become a subject matter expert on IT projects. And I was always an early adopter and wanting to see, less manual processes, and legacy systems were frustrating and whatnot. So I was on these projects as a subject matter expert for my area. And then I was asked to lead a business transition team for a really big project over at DHS. And that's when, the doors flew open for me. And I, heard the terms for the first time: project management and organizational change management, and maybe later in life than many of you. But I don't know if you all can, remember the time you first, realize that there was like a framework or a discipline for some of these things, be it business analysis or OCM or project management. So anyhow, it was, definitely a fit for me. And I was excited to actually, realize that there was, a lot of opportunities in these areas. So we have this common language and these disciplines. I think the thing that brought me to this topic today, besides being invited, was and how it kind of evolved for me, was really just understanding that over time, the way project management has evolved, and OCM coming into play, and culture and things like that becoming more a part of our conversations, I thought that it would be really good to just kind of dissect where those connections are. So there's going to be, as Tim said, 2 more forums. So this is just, touching one little piece of it, really. But this was the area I thought I could speak to. So what are we going to talk about today? So I do also have my project management professional certification. But I want to mention before we jump in that it's my experience is solely in IT projects, and there's other types of projects out there. I know probably the majority of you work with IT projects, but there's probably some different perspectives out there that would be good, for me to understand. But today, that's kind of where I'll be speaking from. And also state government, right? 28 years, I'm probably a little state government jaded and have some speak in me that I don't even realize. So I'll try to be inclusive in my conversation today, but certainly if you need clarifications on something or have something to add from your perspective, definitely let us know. So we have an introduction here, just really some things I wanted to kind of parse out before we get started. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on what OCM is or what project management is. I think that's a kind of a separate course, but if you need some of that foundational information, I think you probably all know how to find it. So really just going to kind of jump in here and start speaking to where I see the connections. Few clarifications, but really just jumping in. So introduction, I want to talk about the intersections. And then I had roles and responsibilities as the next section, and stakeholder management got so big that I pulled it out. And I think stakeholder management is a critical piece of all of this, which is why there's actually a full session that's going to be on it later. So we're going to get a little bit of it here, and then more even in one of the future OCM forums. So, and then we'll go into some other roles and responsibilities where I saw really strong connections between the project activities and those OCM team members. So disconnect between project management and OCM feeds the 40 to 70% failure rate, that cultural element that can divide or unite project teams. So there's a number of things that can change success, factors for a project. And I don't believe that OCM is the only one, obviously, but I do think that a strong attention to that, and then there's some rigor there, probably says something about the health of the project overall, because that awareness to the people side of things is really important. And we talk about culture, but what really is culture, and why does OCM impact culture? That's a whole other conversation, but it really does impact the culture and increase your success. The OCM needs to be considered in your project work. There will be repercussions if you don't. I'll talk just a little bit about those, but so hopefully we don't have to sell OCM too much, but we will talk a little bit about that. And then the last thing I'll say here is that this is an art, not a science, right? These are considerations. There's no requirements in how you apply this. This is for you all to take and say, now this is what my project looks like. This is what my change initiative looks like. This is how I want to apply this, and connect a few dots for you that you may have connected before, but never really been as intentional about it as you need it to be. So just a couple definitions here to start with. This is about as deep as I go in explaining them, but the interesting thing about the two definitions, right, is that the first line of these two paragraphs is the same, right? The discipline of applying specific processes. So that's what we're doing with these, right? And that's why they're so handy to have, because there's this discipline of applying specific processes, and it's a wash, rinse, repeat kind of situation. So what we see differently though over there on project management is that these are processes to lead the work of a team to achieve the project goals within the given constraints. And then on the other side, these are specific processes for organizational change management to support the people impacted by the change to achieve an outcome. And I'm going to give you a few different snapshots of how project management, organizational change management intersect and are different, but we're mostly going to be talking about the intersections. Some of the way that we describe the stages or phases of these things, obviously we've got the initiate, plan, execute, monitor, and control, and close from PMI. And then a framework that I use would be to prepare, manage, and reinforce change. So again, just kind of two different ways of looking at that and giving you a little bit of an introduction there. And then just putting it out there for you, how we think about how people deal with change is important whenever we're managing change in a project or other initiative. But the different ways of going out there and reading theory and understanding how people work is really important. And I think some of these, that I've listed here, you can go out and kind of learn more about. Kubler-Ross is actually about, death and how you approach that. So interesting that change is similar to that, but some folks, change is very hard. And that's one of the things that we all learn when we start to dig into organizational changes, that there's, this bell curve of folks out there. And for some of them on, the one side of that bell, it's very difficult. But anyhow, just some methodologies. ProSci is the last one you see listed there. That's the one that I'm most familiar with and have been applying throughout my career. What's great about that is that it really does apply tools and processes. So some of these are more theoretical and don't really get to the actual how to, I mean, they talk about how to handle it, but really in the, IT project realm, the ProSci has been really, the most applicable for me. And one of the reasons is this AdCard. Probably most of you have heard about this. If you haven't, ProSci has a lot of great webinars and information on it. And this is really just resonates with me. And so there's these 5 components here of AdCard and of individual change, essentially. So how, like, what people need to get to change and to really have that adoption of change. So awareness, right? Have they even heard that it's happening? So you want to make sure you've told them. Then we've got the desire. Do they understand the why? That's typically that buy-in. And then do they have the knowledge to understand how to make the change, right? So they're going from point A to point B. How have we helped them to get there? And then for ability, can they turn that knowledge into the practical abilities to get that work done in that new way? And then lastly, there's that reinforcement to sustain it. What does that look like? Is it training? Is it QRGs? What kind of website have you set up? What's your help desk look like? That type of thing. So we're going to now launch into our very first poll to keep you all engaged. Hopefully I haven't lost anyone yet. Now, this is my first time using polls on Teams. So I'm hoping you can see there that there's a little instruction there. So if the poll doesn't pop up for you, what I'll need you to do is maybe go check the chat or the poll button there. As you can see, I put a little picture in there, but I'm going to go ahead and launch this and we're going to all see together what happens. And feel free to let me know what happens. That'd be great. So are folks seeing that now?
I'm seeing it.
Okay, great. So if you could just let me know which of the AdCard components you think is the hardest to achieve. I'll give you just a minute. How many people do we have on today, Tim? Do you know?
Looks like we've got 45, including the presenter.
Okay, super. Then I'll just give another minute. We're at 40. Okay, looks like we've slowed down there. Probably have a few folks. There we go. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close it, and hopefully the results are going, and this is anonymous, so don't worry. No wrong answers either, but let's see if it displays the results. So you might have to, again, go to chat to see the results. Are you all seeing it in chat?
I'm seeing them in the chat, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so we got 5% for awareness, 44% for desire, 17% for knowledge, 19 for ability, and then 14 for reinforcement. So a wide variety there. Probably all of us coming from our own Oh, good, great. Thank you, Christy. It's working just splendidly then. So 45% on desire, and that is where I would lean, honestly, and where my experience has taught me. I think every project is going to be different, though, right? Like some people that might be the easy button because they need the change so bad, but I've really had some resistors, and so I really feel like getting folks to that desire, understanding the why, and that they become an advocate for a supporter of the project or initiative is huge. And again, all of these are a challenge, and just good to make sure that we're focusing on each of them. And understanding where your project might have the hardest time, right? So which area, as you're starting off on something, do you believe would be the hardest, and then how do you focus your efforts there? Great, thank you for participating. Okay, so a clarification here, something that I know has tripped up folks on my teams in the past is, when we have, we're not precise with our language. And I think often on a project, you sort of get your groove going and everyone knows what topic you're on. But If you just say change management to someone, it could mean a few things. A project manager is probably going to mean something different than to a organizational change management lead. So project change management, this is actually a component of the project management discipline, right? So this is the thing that is used by the process that is used by the project managers to manage the change across the project. So if there's a change that's going to impact the time scope, the budget, then that needs to be handled in whatever the process is in the way that they've outlined. So, which is different than that organizational change management, which is the discipline that focuses on the people affected by the project. So just hitting home kind of one more distinction for you there. Project management is the completion of the project. OCM is the buy-in and adoption that can be applied to any product or change. Okay, so consequences of not managing the change. Again, as I said, probably don't have to sell a lot of you on the need for this, but there could be a reduction in productivity. And I know I've personally been involved in situations where it was either because of attitudes or because of skill sets. So you have to watch both of those things as you're managing the change, right? So that desire and then that knowledge and ability. But the resistors, they're out there, and so having a resistance management as a part of your planning is really important, and identifying why and getting to their motivation there. A decrease in morale. So folks don't like having things just thrown at them. People want to understand and feel like they're heard. So to approach a change and expect that it's that people don't need some attention during that change is going to not make them feel very good, which could then make them leave, right? Turnover. So and you don't want folks to leave because we haven't done well communicating or managing a change. And then there's always this us and them thing, and this is this is something I really like to fight hard against, because it seems like when you're on a project, the project is either the us or the them, and then there's everybody else, right? And so really making sure it's like we are all us and in this together, and having a skill set and being able to do that with your work is really magical. So and that should happen early in your process. You want those who are affected, involved in the planning, right? And you may have stakeholders who are passive, but then you could have those that are even against you and that throw a wrench in the whole machine, and can just add to just dysfunction in the whole initiative. So these are the reasons you might want to have people on your side. Okay, so obstacles to organizational change, and this could be for probably the project as well, more generally than just the OCM side of things. But not doing your planning well, not having enough folks. I know one of the things I heard when I first joined that big project at DHS was that they were planning this project based on some best practices, which was like 11% of your budget should be for OCM, which was that's why I think I had such a great introduction to the whole approach, because we had the resources we needed. We were able to hire and build teams. We had all the trainers we needed. So getting, having an organization that really believes in OCM and back you on that is important. A lack of communication, the fear of the impact or losing control. I mean, sometimes folks might have to change jobs or change the way they do their jobs, and that can be scary. We've talked about the buy-in, the why, the desire. So if you don't have that and you don't get that early, then that can really slow things down as you try to make the change. And then just a lack of skills. And I see that both on the adoption side of things, but also just on your team as you're building your team. And I loved hearing the from Emily and Coleman that they were getting certifications and things like that, because 10 years ago that was not happening. And I have talked to directors of agencies, and they'll say, I've never heard of a business analyst. So we've come a long ways, and I think things like the Bang Forum and different things the state can do to really build our skill sets in some of these areas is really important. Okay, one last little slice at a comparison here. I talked a little bit about project management and how it's important to make sure we're managing the time, the budget, the scope, and there's also quality there, right? And then the way we might measure some of our success is very similar to the AdCard, but I like you to just kind of think of it more of like how we measure success. And that's awareness, desire, knowledge, and ability. And, typically, we'll talk a little bit more about assessments in a minute, but you want to frame your surveys and how you assess how you're doing with your organizational change management on things like these type of capabilities. Okay. But isn't it all about business benefits? Really, I mean, so while we maybe have two different things we measure that show success, at the end of the day, I believe that change is all about business benefits, right? So what do and we're all in that same boat trying to deliver those business benefits, regardless of what role we play on that project. So I have a little sample here of some business benefits. And this I actually pulled directly from the business case that the EIS P3 team has up in their PPM tool. So thankfully that's up there. But and this is just the sample, but you have to identify these early on. Like you know why you've initiated this change. Let's talk about what it's going to do for us in the end, at the end of the day. And not only do you need to know what it's going to do for you, but you need to know your baseline too. Where are you starting now? Getting these written down, and they'll evolve. They're never perfect right out of the gate. But you want to get these written down, get them vetted with your stakeholders, and they will start to help you with your OCM, because this is the why. Okay, so getting those down and confirmed and validated with your stakeholders early is important. And this next slide is just really about thinking about how we have project, and I have project management big in the middle because it does, kind of run the show, right? But if you think about these other areas and these other disciplines, they're important, right? And they're all going to intersect. You may not have all of these applied on your project. You may not have expertise in some of these areas, and you may not need them. But really just thinking about how all of these things are going to lead to business benefits. And, obviously today talking about how we can help projects with organizational change management. But we're all in it for the same reason. And this last slide in this section, I just threw in here. I had a few different spots I could have put it, but it's really just intriguing to me. And I have not had a deep dive into the 7th edition of the Project Management Book of Knowledge that PMI publishes, but I am just stunned at the culture focus to this. And so, I don't know how many of you out there are project managers or dabble in both. I think there's a fair amount of you, but if you look at this, be a diligent, respectful, and caring steward, create a collaborative project team environment, effectively engage with stakeholders, demonstrate leadership behaviors. What else here? Embrace adaptability and resiliency. That's really about people, right? And yeah, so I think that we are seeing a real shift here. And what I imagine is, and does anyone know when PMI was established? Like approximately, if you want to type it in chat, you could, if you know, or just jump in. Well,
We have an exact
Yes.
date. How about that? Good job, Cody.
I know, right? And they were so like early in their time. That's great. It was 69 is what they have on their website, which I thought was so interesting because you know the projects were so different back then that they were doing, and I think that's when I feel like when I took my test for my certification, it felt a little like it was this kind of old school approach, but many great components to it that helped me with my discipline. But IT projects have taken over our approach. And if you think about, building a building back then, maybe, or whatever that project was, and these IT projects that you have all these end users, and they could be, Oregonians, out on the street, they could be our staff, they could be, just a couple people. But just this evolution of project management and where we're at with OCM, I find it to be very interesting. And I think we're just, evolving, of course. So. Okay, so into intersections here. I have another little poll for you. So gonna launch it and then So have you experienced a project where the OCM is seamlessly integrated with other project work? So like it was spot on. Got 27 responses.
And we're still at 45 folks.
Okay, great. I have resistors out there.
Well, and I'm of course counting you as well when I do that count, so.
Yeah, that's true. Let's get to 40. Come on, everybody. Maybe people have stepped away. Okay, we look like we've stalled here at, oh, there's 37. Good work. Okay, we'll close that. So it looks like yes is, oh, interesting. It changed a little bit after I closed it. So apparently you can continue to submit. That's fine. So it's changing as I speak here. It looks like no is the strongest response, but not too strong. So that's good news, right? And not sure is fine as well, because maybe you don't even know what that looks like. What should that look like? And then yes is 36%, and I'm happily surprised by that. I've seen it done, really, really well. And I think as I mentioned, we had a really great approach to it at that project at DHS. And so it is really possible. And I think the more that we can, focus on that, like we said, it will keep adding to the success. Okay. Oh, I see. I have to close the poll, FYI, apparently. So otherwise, that's why folks are still, and I should close this one up here. There we go. Thank you for patience while I learn here. Okay, so next then, this is a very busy slide, but let's see. I hope it can connect some dots for folks. So there, here you're going to see the 5 phases of a project that I talked about earlier. So we got the initiate, plan, execute, monitor, control, and close. Above that, we have some typical project deliverables. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things we see pretty typically, and will help me focus on kind of where we see some OCM connections. And then below, you've got those change phases that I also talked about. So the preparing for change, managing change, and reinforcing change. And we're going to kind of just talk about how these are related. So we're going to start here with the sponsor agreement. And your sponsor is your first and most important change champion, right? So one of the things I see as a real challenge, though, is how we help our sponsors understand what that role is. So having an actual document that helps with that process can assist that sponsor in really being clear about their role and the expectations. And I go into some detail with sponsors here in a minute, so I'm not going to say too much more about that right now. A business case is, basically a case for change, right? So we often have, do nothing as one of the options, but I rarely see that as a choice. Sometimes we end up doing nothing in the long run, but excuse me, I have my phone on off and it's a rookie move. Somehow I think my kids still get through emergency types of things, but it wasn't an emergency. So anyhow, and the business case, especially for those that are submitting, business cases for oversight or for project prioritization for budget purposes, OCM should be covered there. And so considering that people side of your change is actually important now to, getting approval for projects. All right. So next is resource planning. And I have a couple actual documents I want to show you here, but obviously a lot of resource planning has to be done early on with your project team and whatnot. I find that it can get kind of dicey and complicated when you're trying to recruit your subject matter experts and your change champions. So those people who aren't really full-time on your project, but critical to your project. So I'm going to just show you a couple documents that I found really helpful in my work in the past. And I think I'm showing them here because the project needs to make sure that OCM considerations are included here. This isn't just for, the actual product development or, those pieces. So this is a form that you can use to bring in your subject matter experts or your change champions, explain, what you need. So it has a lot of good kind of questions here so that you send this to the manager and you say, yep, I'm going to need this person, 10 hours a month, and this is what I need them for and why you need them. And, what I have also seen happen is that often you need people more or less in certain phases of the project. And so you can include that too. Sometimes even a small table will help with that. So you can say, we're going to, need them more and it's going to increase during this period of time and then decrease, at others. So this is one thing that I highly recommend you work together on as a OCM and project manager. And then this is an overall just engagement plan. So you have some business needs and to bring in, and it could be your financial team or your human resources team or your policy team or whoever that you need to bring in for certain types of meetings, right? And as business analysts, you're probably all very familiar with these different types of things that you want to do, but how do you outline those things? And so we all do that differently. If you haven't had a process or a tool to do that in the past, you can use this document to help you do that. And it really just kind of outlines very specifically each of the types of sessions you're going to have, how many of those sessions, who you need there, and then again it will pivot and help you to inform those managers and those team members that aren't full-time on the project that are going to have to be there, and they aren't going to like it if it's a surprise. Any questions on those documents? Okay. So risk management, obviously there's an intersection point for OCM there. There's always OCM risk. So if you don't have any on your project, that would be surprising. Even if you're handling OCM really well, but there's typically adoption issues or end user buy-in. Also, some of the other things like, your ability to really define requirements, that can be a challenge. And then that changes your impact on the end users. So there's always those risks and issues. And then next, I'm going to skip a few things here. They're not that they're not related to OCM, they're just not as tightly intersected. Obviously, the project management plans, the two components of that are just so strongly tied to OCM would be that stakeholder management plan and the communication plan, right? Like it's very OCM. And I find that's where people get confused at who's doing what, because it's a part of the project management plan. Sometimes there's some expectations for project managers, which, depending on how you've sliced and diced your roles and responsibilities, there could be some things there. But really, you want to make sure there's that OCM focus there. And then I'm going to lump together kind of the current future state, the requirements, the design docs, and the testing. Because those, while they're very different activities, I think you have similar considerations there, and that you need to determine how much information your OCM team needs out of those sessions or processes. So they might have inputs into it, right? If they have certain knowledge and information. But at the end of the day, if your OCM team has stepped through this change with you, then they're going to understand it better and be able to more fully support the end users, once we get to the, implementation point. So really thinking about where they come into play here is important. Risks of actions, issues, decisions log, obviously just kind of talked about that and how they might apply there. There's going to be things related to OCM. And then the status report, also you should have information about OCM in your status report. Again, depending on the size of your project, that, how much space is going to change. Obviously, managing stakeholders is something we're doing during the monitor and control phase, and typically led by OCM at that point. Operations and management plan, we need a training plan. How are we going to train new employees? How are we going to train when we have a change to the system, etc. And then, of course, lessons learned and closeout. Everything, has that, you want to have that eye on OCM, but really kind of stronger on some of these things I've mentioned here. So then below, really talking about some of the things that we want to do to prepare for the change. You start out with that OCM plan. And what you often are outlining there are that, there's a few things you're outlining there, but are how you're going to assess the change. And so I'm a big believer in surveys and focus groups and, just talking to people. And so, on a larger project, I found that we've implemented, all of those things, and it's been very fruitful. But so the assessments are you might have organizational assessments or individual assessments. So kind of thinking those things through. And there's obviously a whole skill set to just doing surveys in the right way. And getting the right people involved. You want a cross section, you want, to make sure there's enough responses, et cetera. Also here in your plan, obviously, closely linked to your communication and stakeholder plan, but oh my gosh, I just lost my thought. Oh, considering other change initiatives. That's one thing I feel like sometimes we forget to do until it sort of, raises its problems to us. And so what other changes are happening in your organization, and really outlining those and how the 2 change teams or 4 change teams or whatever are going to coordinate. So, that's important, and it can be very challenging. And if, in my role with M365, I've seen it as we approach every single agency, we're constantly, having to run up against their other priorities. So really good to have an eye to that. So then under managing change, obviously you have a training plan. I put that in managing change because I really do feel like it kind of skirts over to, you don't start training right away. You start to kind of figure out what you're developing, what you're going to be delivering, and then that training plan comes to fruition. It's not a plan you have typically really early on. And then obviously how to manage the resistance, and that can be, very detailed or pretty straightforward. Engaging your change agents, so those change champions, and again, making sure you understand your resource needs for those. We had change champions from all around the state for that large project, and they would come together in Salem, once a month. And in the good old days when we actually got together in a big room. And they would go back out and they, it was, they did a great job going out and being sort of the boots on the ground for us. And that was great. Road shows and demos, I love those. Good to get out there and start showing things and get in front of people. And then you want to obviously reinforce the change with the training, go live support, etc. So a lot there. This is just one other little look as I was doing my research for this presentation. Infotech, I don't know if you're all familiar with Infotech, but they're a great organization that actually allows you to just use their stuff, and it's great. They are, have a wide variety of information that can help in IT organizations. But this is just a sample project timeline, and then the corresponding OCM work stream there. Real basic. There's not a lot of complexity to this, but it just gives you another look at what you might be thinking about during certain timeframes. If you're doing something that's more agile, which I know we're all kind of talking about and wanting to learn more about, and some of you may be doing it, there's that kind of wash, rinse, repeat piece of this. Then you're doing these things multiple times throughout your project. But just another way to consider it. Okay, so another little interaction here. So hoping people will either get on their microphones or type in chat, but just looking for any ideas or thoughts you have about projects that don't need organizational change management. Server upgrade. Thank you, Brittany. Yes, exactly. There's like 2 people that care about that, right? Projects that are upgrading existing software. That's good. Yep. So really what it comes down to is there's not much of an impact, right? Exactly. Changes that don't affect people. Thank you, Karis. So there's not a lot out there that doesn't need some eye on OCM. And again, you got to right size it. But we've got people involved in most things. So that is exactly what I was looking for. All right. And then one more question for you. Do all organizational changes need a project? So just kind of flipping this. I hope you can't hear that lawnmower. I don't know. It's like they've got the biggest lawn ever. There's still no one out there. So no. Okay. Right. Yes. So you're right. So it could be a one and done change and it's happened, but if there is a need for even management of a few tasks to get through something, I say just put a little lens on it from project management perspective, and having timeframes and dates to drive to can really help with these changes. And I think we're used to it when we initiate a project for having those dates, but sometimes we make these changes and we don't really consider like would a project framework help this. So just keep your eye on those types of things. And we have a little no to the lawnmower, but yes to needing a project. And then I see a little disagreement out there on the new software, which again, what does it depend on? So if you have new software and no one's going to notice, and there's no impact, then don't need a lot of, but you probably would still send out an email, right, to let people know. But that's a light touch right there for something that people aren't going to notice. So see, oh, it's noticeable. Christy, what do you mean it's noticeable? And then Lisa said, I agree. Anytime people are involved, there needs to be OCM lens scaled to the amount of change. Yep. Karis, I think when we hear project, we think of a big to-do. Good point. But dates, communications, impact, exactly. There's a light touch, to project management. And I don't think it has to be everything in a 70-page project management plan. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's noticeable. I see. So your software change is noticeable. Yeah, gotcha. I was thinking maybe it was the lawnmower, but okay. Good. Anything else? Good conversation. Okay, a couple final notes on our intersection here. So consider at the beginning, how often does the PM or project director and OCM lead need to meet? Where's that kind of top connection for your project work there? So think about that cadence. And then which project meetings will the OCM team or lead, if it's just one person, need to attend? And I think I see as I'm in the middle of executing a project that we will initiate a new meeting and then we'll forget a few people. And it's because we don't have a checklist. And if we don't go through that checklist and say, oh, here are those people that we need to, we just kind of get into a little bit of a routine. So really having intention about who you need to include in those project meetings and making sure OCM is at the table when they need to be. And I really also get cringy at too many people in meetings. Like it makes me anxious, just wasting people's time or getting, maybe sometimes too much engagement too, right? Like you need to kind of just move on or whatever. So there's something to manage there and I get it. And I think, we can't all be at everything. And so that's just another kind of skill set that we have to have around facilitating who needs to be where when, but at least having the intention is where we got to start. So. And then, so from the business analysis side of things, I already kind of talked about the resource request bit, but so you see that here in managing your subject matter experts and coordinating that approach, and then not forgetting to coordinate that approach as you go through different stages of the project. So it's kind of easy to do when you're initiating and you're excited, and then later we kind of get into those ruts as I mentioned. That current and future state work, which I think is so important. And sometimes we actually neglect this piece. We could probably, I'm sure at some point Bang will probably have a whole session on this, but you need to rely on the people who understand the impacts of the change and how the documentation that's typically done by a business analyst is going to really highlight those changes because it will show you those gaps from the current state to the future state. And then the requirements and design sessions. Obviously, OCM needs to know what the project is delivering, and that can be a real challenge, especially when you're bringing your trainers on board. You don't, typically have your trainers on board the whole time, but having some people who are developing those leads that are developing that training material that can then kind of, share that knowledge then with those trainers that are out there with the people is really important. So. It's always a learning curve for folks, but the more we can learn along the way, the better. And one other note here that I think is really important is that active in-person participation is really often better than a documentation review, right? So saying, oh, well, I sent those documents to our OCM lead or the OCM team. It's like, yeah, it just doesn't stick as much, right? And I think we all have a responsibility to make sure we're reviewing the documents we need to review, but having that discussion is really important. Again, something to manage. We overmeet for sure, but I really love an in-person, those in-person sessions, obviously. So yeah, and Brad McKinney actually is going to be covering the business analysis and OCM part of our series here, so going to go into that in more detail, and I'm really excited for that. Okay. And as I said, stakeholder management will be the one after Brad's, and I'm just going to give you some of sort of the where you need to consider it at the high level here. So establish an influence. Obviously, who are the people will help you define what you're doing and then subsequently support it, right? You need them. And we've got our stakeholders out there because, and we use our stakeholders because we need their knowledge, right? And so, and that can be from a content perspective because they understand the policy, systems, processes of whatever it is you're doing, or because they understand the politics and the communication culture, or those types of subtle things that we also need input on. So think about those, you know, concrete and abstract kind of components of leveraging that knowledge and wisdom there. And then obviously gaining alignment. We want to get everyone on the same page, present the options, agree to the path. Some stakeholders more than others, you're going to really want to make sure that they have given you a thumbs up, and we don't assume that it's a thumbs up. And I have done that in the past, and it typically comes back to bite you. You want to assume that if no one said anything, everything's fine, but it's better to just actually get a true thumbs up on that. And then issues, they always arise, right? So you want to bring the info that is needed to your stakeholders so that they can help you manage through those. All right, so the three phases for stakeholder management, that's the identify, analyze, manage. I do have one other document from Infotech that I'm just going to show you here. And it's you can see, I'm sure you can barely see, but there's a number of tabs here at the bottom. And I really have probably used just a more basic spreadsheet for managing my stakeholders in the past, and that's fine. I think that can work. I found it very interesting, though, the way that they had built this, and wanted to just share it with you all since it was a resource that I had found. And so you just go in here and you put your information in, and it actually kind of pulls out this visual for you all. And I think this is back to kind of making sure we're communicating and validating, like having a graphic like this can really help. So how you document your identification and analysis of your stakeholders is important. So be intentional about what it is you want to know. And we're going to talk in a minute about some different ways that you might want to assess your stakeholders, right? Because there's different components that you might want to think about. Okay, so stakeholder management. It's a partnership between the project manager and the OCM lead. What the project manager's role there would be to initiate the effort to develop the stakeholder management plan. So they've got to, make sure it's on the work task list, and they can manage the schedule and activities once those have been outlined. What the OCM lead is going to do is actually do the analysis with the team and with the agency staff. They write the plan, lead the effort to execute the stakeholder management plan. So they're really in charge. It's a very light touch from the project manager. They're just kind of like, let me know what's going and if you're meeting your dates. that's kind of where it's at there. And there are people who I have seen on very small initiatives that are both the PM and the OCM. Obviously, that changes things. So with all of this, you take it with a grain of salt based on the size and complexity of your work. But in those bigger efforts, you're going to want to make sure you have a clear roles and responsibilities there. All right, so I've seen stakeholder analysis done in a lot of different ways. These are some of the components that you might want to rate on. There might be other factors that you find important for your work, but we're always interested in how much influence a particular stakeholder might have on an initiative. So that's also sometimes, how much they care, right? So, and that's along the interest spectrum there. And then how much knowledge does the stakeholder need? How much responsibility will they hold, and what are the actions that they might have to do? So those are other ways that you might want to, or columns you might want to have on your stakeholder management plan. And then are they internal or external? And sometimes that's telling for different reasons. And then are they a supporter? Are they neutral? Are they a resistor? And really, I think figuring out how you're going to determine that is an interesting journey, but I really think it can be impactful to your planning to find out all of these components. So we've identified them, we've analyzed, now we can communicate. Okay, so, and the communication obviously dovetails really strongly with the stakeholder management plan. There's always this, dance I have found with projects, like when do we just refer to the other document versus repeating certain things, because there's a lot of overlap. But I tend to like to write things down once and then refer. It's a little more straightforward from my standpoint. I've seen a lot of projects reiterate in multiple documents on how they're approaching something. But yeah, so this is just a graphic that has no, very broad stroke here on how I see communications. I believe most project communications are going to help with adoption and knowledge around a project. There's very few things that I think don't actually help with that. So things we think of as project communication, will list as project communication, really have goals that are going to align to organizational change management, and that's fine, and that should be expected. So I don't think you have to spend too much time thinking about that, but what I have seen be really helpful is in that communication plan to really outline what's internal to the project, because that typically lines up with, that's going to be project. Anything that's external to the project is going to have more of that OCM component. But I have another poll, so we can talk a little bit more about that. Maybe. Okay. So which of these is only project communication and not related to any type of OCM activity, one of the AdCards, right? Got 24. As soon as I figure out how to have fun music, we can up our game with some of that next time.
And we've dropped down to participants. So just
how many?
44.
Okay.
I think we had spiked up to about 48 at one point. Tends to fluctuate a little bit throughout the meeting.
Gotcha. They checked in and then checked right back out.
Yeah, and some folks are off work at 4 o'clock, so they tend to leave the meeting early.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I know I have always wanted to attend these, and then I'm like, I have a conflict at one point, so I catch the recording later, so that's always good too. I'm glad you all record these.
We put those recordings up, so I'm sure we're using that to catch the last half hour.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. So we've got meeting minutes at 77%, status report 21%, and project newsletter at 3% there. So, I will say there could be, some argument here between meeting minutes and status report. I probably lean strongly toward meeting minutes being the thing that is not probably going to help end users as much. So that was the answer I was leaning towards, but the status report is also very project based typically, but you know who you're impacting with those status reports, and that would be your, your steering committee. So there are, the way that you influence your steering committee is important, and that they could actually, then there's that ripple effect, right, of what they do with the information that they get. So so I'd give it a touch of OCM in that status report, but not much. And then project newsletter, would be really interested in what the person who thought the project newsletter was thinking, but I really do see that as something that's going to help people with I would say awareness, desire, and knowledge. So I really do see a strong OCM component there, and then the website as well. But happy to have dialogue about that. Okay. Well, good. I hope that just helps you think a little bit about, as you're structuring your communication plans, what really is going to have impacts in your OCM arena. And, you know, just a little clarification there. Okay, moving on to roles and responsibilities. So sponsors, as I mentioned, you're like first and most important change champion, right? And the Project Management Institute research shows that having actively engaged executive sponsors is the top driver of project success. All right, thank you, Annie. And I have had some great project sponsors, and it's still really like one of the hardest jobs, I think, as a project manager or project director. And so anything we can do to really figure out how to best support, engage our sponsors, encourage our sponsors is important. And so I have another little poll for you. It's like a self-serving poll. I really am interested in what percentage of your projects have had appropriate sponsorship engagement? So what's going on out there right now for you all, and what has been your experience with sponsorship? Okay, we're at 26. Let's get to 30. Here we go. Come on, everybody. Almost there. 29. There we go. Okay. So it looks like the winner is about 50%. So that's not bad. I think I have heard from some folks that they've never experienced it. So that's good. And yes, you're so right, Tamara. The leading the sponsor is a really great, leading up to your sponsor is a really important activity, and having an intention around that. We do have a few with 100%. So all of your initiatives, that's amazing. I would love to hear if you have any tips on how you've done that to share with folks, or how you've seen that done. That's great. And then 75% also not too shabby. And then a few at 25% there, and nobody with none. So that's good. So I'll go ahead and close that one. So I will say these results are better than I anticipated. And again, though, I think that's still a focus that we have to really consider, and who it is that we have as our sponsor. Just a kind of sample set of sponsor responsibilities here. And the 3 top ones there I've highlighted as more of the OCM related, and the things that as an OCM lead you're going to want to encourage. The other things are probably more along the project manager's role in managing, but you have to do it together, right? So there's that. So they're going to act as a vocal and visible champion for the project, promote key stakeholder support, ensure participation, collaboration, and commitment from all impacted organizational units. So understanding that that's their role and that's what they need to do is important. And we could add a lot more words to this, and certainly I'm sure there's templates out there and experiences you've all had with more to that. Yes, there's sponsorship training tools. I actually was working for a while to get some sponsorship training here for us, and one of my dreams would be to go around the state training sponsors. Like, I think I would I would love that job. But so far no one's asked me to do it, so that's all right. We'll start with you all and see what we can do, right? So what are the challenges that we have in effective communication, right? And that's 2 ways. Like, they're not communicating with you, you're not communicating with them, or not exactly sure how best to communicate with them. So how do you approach that? You want to provide information on the critical milestones and measurements. So, how you do that, though, is really by that third bullet, and that's agreeing early to the communication channel and level of content. So how best do they get that information? It could be, you know, that they have a particular style of communication that you need to understand. And you're going to want to identify any barriers and risks early. So just thinking about it and having those conversations early on are critical and are going to clear the path for you in the future, because you've already said, this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to talk about these things. This is how I'm going to give you the information. This is the information I need from you. We have a sponsorship agreement that we've drafted too, that you can just outline everything so that there's an actual document that's reviewed and a part of your project artifacts. The other challenge is the lack of cultivation of the skills needed. To Tamara's point, we have to help them cultivate those skills. It's not something that comes natural. And I think with the advent of all of these IT projects, we've got these people who are maybe really good at social work or transportation or whatever it is, and we're saying now you need to sponsor this IT project. Well, what does that mean? What do they need to look out for? What's important for them to do in their role? And we need to help them with that. And then the other thing is that they're overextended, right? We never say, oh, we're going to carve this time out for you to do this. This is in addition to your day job. Sometimes you get sponsors with more than one initiative. So having someone who's not really available because they're so busy is a struggle. So that's something you may have to manage. I have seen the project director role really help. That was something that DHS has initiated a lot in the past. I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but it kind of adds this layer of leadership that helps to both manage a sponsor and then also provide just that additional support for the team. That's more of a day-to-day support, which with the sponsor, you're never going to get that, right? So really just important to decide which roles and responsibilities are going to help you move your project forward. And sometimes the project manager can be empowered to have more of a project director role, but that has to be clear, and people have to understand that. So next role would be a steering committee role. And so again, I have the three kind of highlighted here that are around the change management piece. That serve as a champion for the project success, provide executive support, outreach and communication, enable access to subject matter experts. So sometimes you've got like the program directors that are all sitting on the steering committee. They're the ones you need their subject matter experts for. So there's that. They're also sometimes the preferred senders of communications, right? So it's not always great for it to come from your info mailbox or even the sponsor. You really want to, in your stakeholder analysis communication planning, determine who people want to hear from, who's their preferred sender. And so I like that to be another point of consideration for these plans.
Jen, I'm not hearing you anymore. So hopefully if you've frozen, hopefully you can hear me and figure out your bandwidth issue and get back to us.
Oh no.
Oh, there you are.
I'm back. Oh no, what just happened? I even plugged in today. We're not even Wi-Fi. Oh, we're so close. Okay, let me am I back?
Yeah, and you've got a
I'm
question
gonna
in the chat.
Okay, super. I'm gonna just turn off my video. I don't think anyone has an incoming video, but I'm gonna just turn that off. That's off. Okay. Let me go to chat. Let's see. Question: when you have a sponsor not engaging due to busy schedule, how do you attempt to get the sponsor to engage? Yeah, again, my comments here are really about that initial initiating with the sponsor and having that outlined at the beginning. But once you're already in flight, or if you're joining a project that's already in flight, that is going to be harder. I would say that you have to ask them how best to engage them. I think that's a good thing, and to really find a way to approach them that explains why you need to engage them, because just saying I need a 15-minute meeting or a minute meeting with you every week or every day or whatever that is probably isn't going to resonate with them as much as saying why. And where anytime you think about why you're trying to do something for a project or an effort, think about what the risks are if you don't do it. So I find it's often easy to motivate people if I start talking to them about the risk. And sometimes you have to accept the risk, right? So so that can help in that way if you really get down to the nuts and bolts of why you need to meet with them. And then Tamara says they also need to understand how important their role is to the adoption of the project. Yes, yeah. So there's lots of documentation out there about the importance of sponsorship. And that's why I kind of find it helpful if it's not the project manager who's having to tell the sponsor the role is important, but they actually see just, that there's a lot of studies out there that say that it's important. So, and then Lisa says, do a quick scan to see if there's something more immediate taking their attention. It might quickly pass and you have them back as an engaged sponsor. That is great. Yeah. Yeah, because they could have just had to check out because of something else that's peaking and then they'll be back. Yeah, but really being clear about what you need and why, and showing that you understand where they're at, but that they have an important role. And so like I have had many a risk log that have sponsorship engagement as a risk. So you do what you have to do there. Okay, so steering committees, we want to make sure we have OCM as a topic. And then we want to track it on the status report, and how that looks for you might be different. You might have different measurements of OCM success factors or progress. And then regular individual check-ins if appropriate. So, we have, how do we get them engaged? If we have to have those regular check-ins where you're face-to-face and you've got that time, then you need to do that. Because I don't know, I would say my sponsors probably read like 50% of my messages is what it feels like sometimes. So you got to be careful with the emails and communicating that way. But again, it could be their preferred method. Others, are on top of every single email. So, and Kimberly says that she likes to send email updates directly to them, not wordy, just clear language. Yeah, if you can make them short and sweet. And this is kind of a strange thing, but I've always felt like it's better to not have attachments. Like if you just put it as soon as they open it, if they don't have to open another document, that can really be helpful to sponsors and everybody, really. I mean, honestly, if I can just open something and boom, see it without having to kind of go through steps or read through it, that can be helpful. So good. Not wordy. Okay, so next I'm going to shift to another role, and that's change leaders. And we just have a few slides left here, but as I said, I had great success with a very large group of change leaders. I think they're always, or not always, but they can be a very important role. They are a liaison for your communications and training. They conduct meetings and communications with their teams. They can then, on the other side, provide input to your design and act as a subject matter expert, because they are the, boots on the ground that are actually using these tools often. And then I really like this because I'm kind of in that phase right now with M365, is that those people who were change champions, and you're chosen as change champions or change leaders for a reason because of a skill set. They can be your power user post implementation. So they might be the early adopters, the ones that are going to really get out there and say, yeah, this is how you use, Planner, for example, on, M365, or all of those advanced tools where some folks just maybe, are going to need that extra in-person boots on the ground support. Okay. So 2 more slides here. Factors to consider in your OCM strategy. And, if you're just starting out, or even if you're in the middle of something right now, think about these things and where you see that there might be some risks. And if there's work that you can put into getting ahead of those things, then do it. And, there's a lot of different tools out there that help you assess these types of things. But these were, here's just a list of things for you to kind of check through and make sure you're considering. What are the politics? Those are always tricky. And hard to understand a lot of the times. So anytime you can get your hands around and understand if there are politics or sensitivities to certain things or certain ways of saying things, it's really important in your messaging. Funding, I've talked about that and making sure we have adequate funding for OCM. The complexity of the change obviously impacts your strategy, and that goes tightly with the impact of the change. How fast you have to go. Going fast is not always in support of helping people with their ability to adopt a change. So you want to consider that. If there's mandates to the work, I find that sometimes that actually kind of trips me up because, for example, the project I'm on right now is a mandate. And, I think there's a lot of business benefits to it, but I have heard people try to explain that the reason we're doing it is because the governor said so. And I don't find that that's often the most persuasive conversation. So anyhow, how you handle your mandates, you have to think about that. The spread, so how many people obviously are impacted. It could be, every single person in your organization or, maybe just certain programs. Impact of other projects, we talked a little bit about that. Organizational complexity, and also, your visibility. Some organizations are much more in the public light than others. And then your overall organization's ability to manage change, because your historic approach to managing change is important to your current change. And I've got Kimberly. Like to send email up. Oh no, that one we got. Pro tip: try not to choose habitual pessimists as your change. Yes, right. It's funny, Kimberly. I actually had a note in my slide notes about like if you get the wrong person, a resistor in that change leader position, like. No, and that does happen because you kind of are throwing the net a little wider there. So, yeah, you have to have the right people in that role for sure. And they need to be a level where they have some clout. Yeah, so people respect them, right? Projects where sections just choose someone. Yeah, they choose the person with the most amount of time, which is not always the best person. So, yeah, I have run into that, and yeah, they get those volunteer positions. And then Lisa says, I like to think of that last as what is your organizational culture? Yes, very good. What assists and what hampers the change direction? Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Considering where your organization is at right now culturally is really important. I feel like there's some organizations that I can see are just very fragile overall because of the culture, right? And anything that comes at them, if it's, it could be more of a challenge because of that culture. Okay, great. Thank you so much for the input. Final thoughts. Obviously, focus on the people. That's like so obvious and ridiculous to even say, but I had to. And then making sure, as I said a few times, right sizing the OCM to the size of your project. And how do you know what that is? There's no magic tool out there unless you all know of a magical tool that actually right sizes it. I think there probably are some tools out there, but there's still some critical thinking that is needed in order to really understand what's needed. And a lot of that comes down to those things on the OCM strategy slide that you just saw. That helps you to understand the size, right? If you have all of those at a high level of concern or impact, then you're going to want to consider that. But you need to then make a plan and write it down. And again, that's like an obvious thing that I'm saying, but honestly, I feel like people get so bent about what they're supposed to do and what framework or discipline they're supposed to follow, and getting kind of wordy with things. And I've seen these project management plans that go on, and I don't find that to be helpful. I really find something succinct that really just hits the things that you need to hit home for your project. Again, those critical thinking skills, which I'm sure a lot of you have, which is so important because it can't just be a cut and paste. It's never just a cut and paste. Oh, ProSci does have a tool for right sizing OCM. There you go. Thank you. I was thinking just after I said is there a tool, and I had heard of a few, but thank you, Lisa. And then sharing change success at all levels with the broader team. So this is really important, and I think we forget about doing this as we are managing the change. So demonstrating that value of the OCM work as it happens, don't just assume that people know or that they see what you're doing on your OCM work. Talk about it, and talk about it a lot. And then realizing those business benefits and celebrating, right? So we're all in this together. And as we make those milestones or hit those business benefits, we want to make sure we celebrate. And then just really encouraging you all to lead from all levels. I know it's not easy. You all have very hard jobs, and I'm sure you have those days that are really challenging. And so making sure you are leading from wherever you're at on a project, and helping those above you, around you, to be their best in support of your project or initiative. All right, and I have one last little slide to just say, and Karis has been so helpful in the meeting chat. Thank you for your input, but she is the wonderful co-chair of our Change Management Professionals Network, and has been doing a great job with some presentations that I really can help feed us and help us in our jobs. So just email her if you want to become a part of that, if you're not already. And just thank you to Karis for all she does for that network. And then I just want to thank you. I appreciate your time today, and really great. I've loved putting this presentation together and had really a fun time. So I hope it was somewhat helpful for y'all. Thank you. Tim, do you need to have any final words, or?
Yep, and I'll bring up the slide real quick. Let me do this. There we go. I didn't want to steal it from you quickly.
Oh no, please.
Writing down your contact information, although I'll remind everybody that the slides will be posted on the Bang website in PDF form, and Jen is planning on putting in the poll results into that PDF so that you should be able to see that in the slides off of our website, as well as get any contact info you need there. And just wanted to say, by the way, Karis, I thought we had the best acronym out there, but I really like yours. That's pretty cool.
I know, with the capital and the lowercase. Yeah.
Yeah, and if no one else noticed, it pretty much spells out champion. So pretty cool. So just a quick shout out with a couple minutes left here that the next part of this 3-part series is going to be December 14th. So please join us same time. As long as you're on our distribution list, our mailing list, you will get the invite, and you'll also be getting our newsletter in November, which will have some reminders and a little bit more detail and bio on Brad and prep like that for the meeting. So be sure to read our newsletter and look for that invite for December to continue with us on this OCM series. And that is it. So unless anybody had some more questions that they wanted to bring in, we've got a couple minutes left until 4:30. Good job, Jen. You almost went right up to time. That was perfect.
I know. That was my biggest worry, was too fast, too slow. So yeah, thankfully.
That was the challenge.
Yeah.
All right. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous. So Lisa said that there are also some infotech tools out there.
Yeah, and I'll put all the 3 things that I showed you, all include with my presentation, that can be shared with you, and you can use those. Actually, the 2 things are actually on the P3 portal, but I'll still share them just in case folks don't have access to that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of BAs aren't in there.
That's a good point. Yep. See.
But good to have the PDF.
Perfect.
And video will be available up on our YouTube eventually. We go through the closed captioning and make sure that the auto captioning got everything correctly, which is sometimes an arduous effort for one of our volunteers. But once that's done, the video will be up on our YouTube for any folks that missed part of it or want to watch it again, which might be a good idea in December, just to refresh your memory before Brad's section. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you all very much for attending. And like I said, we'll see you again in a couple months. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much. Bye.